Somewhere in the Persian Gulf, right now, a tanker captain is sitting on 2 million barrels of crude oil, listening to explosions and watching movies. He has been here for a month. His GPS is jammed, his insurance is void, his employer cannot get him home, and his cargo cannot reach a port. On the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, 400 vessels are stacked in the Gulf of Oman like taxis outside an airport that closed without warning. 20,000 seafarers are stranded across the region, some of them broadcasting fake national affiliations on their transponders, switching their AIS to read Chinese owner or Indian crew. Because in this stretch of water, your flag is no longer about registry, it is about survival. And here is the part that would be funny if it were not reshaping the global economy. The country that shut this strait down, that attacked 17 ships, killed 7 sailors, and collapsed 20% of the world's oil flow, that country is now running a toll booth. Not a metaphorical toll booth, an actual toll booth, with paperwork, a queue, a vetting process, an escort boat, and in at least 2 confirmed cases, a $2 million fee paid in Chinese yuan. Iran did not just close the Strait of Hormuz, it privatized it. To understand how the world arrived at a point where a sanctioned theocracy is operating a pay-per-pass shipping lane through the planet's most important oil choke point, you need to rewind exactly 1 month. On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated air campaign against Iran that included the killing of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Within hours, Iran retaliated with missiles and drones against US bases and Gulf states, and the IRGC broadcast a message on VHF radio to every vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. No ship is allowed to pass. It worked immediately, not because Iran deployed some vast naval blockade, not because it mined every inch of the seabed. It worked because Iran understood something that trillion-dollar navies still struggle with. You do not need to sink ships to close a strait. You just need to make the insurance unaffordable. By March 5th, war risk coverage was pulled. That single bureaucratic decision did what no fleet of warships could. It made it economically suicidal to transit. A shipping company does not need a missile to stop sailing. It needs a phone call from its insurer. On March 1st and 2nd, not a single tanker appeared in the strait. Traffic that had averaged 130 ships per day dropped to 0. Maersk, CMA CGM, Hapag-Lloyd, the titans of global container shipping, all suspended operations. Brent crude blew past $100 a barrel for the first time in 4 years and kept climbing to 126. The head of the International Energy Agency called it worse than both 1970s oil shocks combined. California gas stations hit $5 a gallon. Iraq and Kuwait started shutting in oil wells because they had nowhere to put the crude. 6 cruise ships with 15,000 passengers got stuck in Arabian Gulf ports, unable to reach open ocean. And then came the attacks themselves. Between March 1st and 19th, Iran struck at least 18 commercial vessels. The targeting was broad and apparently random. Ships linked to the US, the UAE, the UK, Thailand, Vietnam, Brazil. The message was not precision, it was terror. Make the water feel dangerous to everyone, and everyone stays away. Washington responded with overwhelming force. B-2 stealth bombers hit underground missile silos with new GBU-72 bunker busters. A-10 Warthogs hunted fast attack boats. Apache helicopters patrolled the coastline. Over 9,000 targets were struck. The Pentagon said Iran's missile stockpile had been reduced by 90%. The man running the IRGC's naval blockade, Admiral Ali Reza Tangsiri, was killed in an Israeli airstrike at Bandar Abbas on March 26th. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told the cabinet that Iran no longer has a navy or a naval commander. And yet, after all of that firepower, after weeks of bombing, after the largest aerial campaign in the region since the Iraq War, the strait is still not open. Not really. Between March 1st and 25th, there were 142 transits. In the same period last year, there were 2,652. That is a 95% collapse. And 67% of the ships that did get through had direct Iranian affiliations. In recent days, that figure rises to 90%. This is where the toll booth enters the story. Around March 13th, something changed. Iran stopped attacking ships, at least most of them. Instead, it began routing traffic through a new passage, not the standard 2-lane shipping channel that runs through the middle of the strait, closer to Omani waters. A different route, one that threads between the Iranian islands of Keshem and Larak, deep inside Iran's territorial waters. The mechanics are bureaucratic and surreal. A ship operator contacts an intermediary with connections to the IRGC. That intermediary collects full documentation: the vessel's IMO number, its ownership chain, cargo manifest, the names of every crew member, and the final destination. This package is forwarded to the IRGC Navy's Hormozgan Provincial Command. The Revolutionary Guard then runs what amounts to a sanctions screening, a cargo alignment check, and a geopolitical vetting. Oil is prioritized. Vessels linked to the US or Israel are rejected outright. If the ship is approved, it receives a clearance code. Then comes the approach. As the vessel enters the strait, IRGC commanders hail it over VHF radio, demanding the code. If the code checks out, a pilot boat is dispatched. An Iranian escort vessel guides the ship through territorial waters, around Larak Island and out the other side. Lloyd's List Intelligence tracked 33 transits using this route in the second half of March. 0 transits were recorded on the normal channel. In other words, the only way through the Strait of Hormuz right now is Iran's way. And some ships are paying for the privilege. At least 2 vessels handed over approximately $2 million each to use this passage. The payments were settled in yuan. That detail matters enormously. It means the transaction architecture is built to route around Western sanctions. The IRGC, designated a foreign terrorist organization by the United States, is collecting revenue in a currency Washington cannot easily freeze. But here is the deeper absurdity, the part that makes this story so much stranger than a military confrontation. Paying Iran to transit the strait may itself violate US, UK, and EU sanctions, which means a shipping company faces a choice: sit in the Gulf and lose money every day, or pay the toll and risk prosecution by its own government. One path leads to financial ruin, the other leads to a courtroom. Neither leads to safety. The ship operators who are transiting are not doing so because the strait is open. They are doing so because the cost of staying still has finally exceeded the cost of the risk. Meanwhile, the ships that are not paying or not approved simply sit. Some broadcast fake affiliations. Some have moved to alternative ports, Fujairah, Corfacon, Sohar, and offload cargo onto trucks. Some just wait. The seafarers play basketball on deck during the day. At night, they watch rockets cross the sky. When the sun goes down, the fear comes, one shipping executive said, because most of the attacks happen in the dark. Step back and look at what has actually happened here. The United States launched a massive air war to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Thousands of sorties, billions of dollars in munitions, the most advanced weapons in the American arsenal deployed against Iran's coastal defenses. And the result, as of late March 2026, is that Iran now controls more of the strait than it did before the war started. Before February 28th, ships sailed freely through international waters. Now, the only functional route runs through Iranian territorial waters, under Iranian escort, with Iranian approval, and in some cases, for an Iranian fee. The operation that was supposed to break Iran's chokehold on global energy has, in practice, formalized it. This matters for a reason that goes beyond oil prices and shipping routes. What Iran has built is not a blockade in the traditional military sense. It is a permission system, a customs regime imposed by force and maintained by geography. Larak Island is just 20 miles from the Iranian mainland. It has not been struck by a single American or Israeli bomb. It houses naval infantry, fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, and a Russian-made satellite communications jamming system. It is the operational backbone of the toll booth, and it is still standing. The strategic logic is almost elegant in its cynicism. Iran cannot defeat the US Navy. It never could, but it does not need to. It only needs to make the strait unusable on any terms other than its own. Attack enough ships to terrify the insurance industry. Pull the war risk coverage. Wait for the traffic to stop. Then reopen a single controlled lane and position yourself as both the threat and the solution. The arsonist selling fire insurance. The protection racket dressed up as maritime governance. And the geopolitical sorting it enables is quietly devastating. Iran now decides who trades and who waits. China gets through, India gets through, Pakistan gets through, Russian-affiliated vessels get through. Ships heading to or from the US or Israel do not. The IRGC is not just charging tolls, it is redrawing the map of who belongs to which economic order, one hull at a time. The strait has become a filter, and the filter is set to separate Washington's allies from everyone else. Even China, supposedly a beneficiary, is discovering that Iranian permission is not the same as Iranian reliability. On March 28th, 2 ultra-large Chinese container ships, the CSCL Arctic Ocean and the CSCL Indian Ocean, both operated by state-owned COSCO, approached Larak Island. They had changed their AIS displays to broadcast Chinese owner and crew. They paused near the toll booth route, and then they turned around. The IRGC said it turned them back to punish Donald Trump for claiming the strait was open. China's biggest shipping company, publicly humiliated, treated as a prop in Tehran's information war. So much for friendly passage. That is the real lesson of the Hormuz toll booth. It is not a story about American military failure, though the gap between the operation's goals and its results is stark. It is not a story about Iranian military genius, though the asymmetry is remarkable. It is a story about what happens when a country with geography, desperation, and cheap drones discovers that controlling a choke point is not about sinking ships. It is about owning the paperwork. Before this war, Iran threatened to close Hormuz for decades. Nobody quite believed it would happen, because the assumption was always that closing the strait would hurt Iran as much as anyone. That assumption turned out to be wrong. Iran's own oil is still flowing. Over 1.5 million barrels per day of Iranian crude continue to load and transit because the ships carrying it are Iranian approved by definition. The toll booth is not blocking Iran's exports, it is blocking everyone else's. The country under the heaviest sanctions on Earth has turned the most important waterway on Earth into a sanctions regime of its own, pointed outward. 20,000 seafarers are still waiting. 400 ships still sit in the Gulf of Oman. Oil is still above $100. Gasoline prices are still climbing. The IEA member states have released 400 million barrels from emergency reserves, buying weeks, not months. Iraq is pumping less. Kuwait is pumping less. Qatar has warned it may have to break long-term LNG contracts for up to 5 years. And through all of it, the only functional lane in the Strait of Hormuz runs through Iranian waters, under Iranian guns, at Iranian discretion. A month ago, the world's most powerful military set out to pry open a 21-mile-wide waterway. What it got instead was a lesson as old as geography itself. You can bomb the fortress, you can sink the fleet, you can kill the commander. But if the other side still owns the narrows still belong to them. Iran could not win a war against the United States, so it did something more dangerous. It opened a booth, hired a clerk, and started charging admission to the global economy. And right now, on both sides of that booth, the world is learning what it costs.